Greetings from a fishing village on the Atlantic coast. You've tuned in to podcast Portwenn, celebrating the world of Doc Martin unofficially. I'm Chesla Wexler, and we'll be discussing Doc Martin, the medicine, the mayhem, and the marvelous people of Portwenn. Podcast Portwenn is an independent fan production, not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by Buffalo Pictures, ITV, Fox, or the creators of Doc Martin or Best Medicine. Today we're rejoined by Pauline Johnson, a seen-it-all fan, who shared with us what she has watched because she watched Doc Martin. Today we'll be discussing seasons 5 and 6 in particular, but you can expect spoilers from the entire series. So Pauline, come through and welcome back to Podcast Portwenn.
Thanks, Chesla. I enjoyed the last experience, so I'm looking forward to this and seeing the result that you come up with.
We come up with.
Well, I was just giving you credit for all the magic editing you did.
Thank you. So seasons 5 and 6,
Yeah.
Why don't you give us the overall themes of what we see in season 5 and then maybe some of your favorite spots?
Well, I think in season 5, they're getting to know each other. They're living together. However, tragedy strikes when Joan passes away. So that casts, I think, a huge damper on things which don't seem to run as smoothly as you would have hoped at the beginning. So I found that Louisa had some difficulties when she was looking after James Henry. It didn't seem that she wanted the full control and stay-at-home mum. She wanted to have him looked after, so long as she wasn't the one that was doing it in the main. So I found that puzzling. I do think they could have worked it out a lot better than they did. But some of the other episodes which transpired were quite funny.
I felt it was, they were living together, but it's pandemonium the whole time.
In the first episode, Martin's on the point of leaving because Louisa has insisted that she didn't want any help from him. He was superfluous to her requirements, and she wouldn't back down on that at all. He wouldn't, shall we say, more forceful and explain that he loved her and he wanted to be involved. So he's all ready to go back to London when the new GP takes ill and he's forced to stay as the GP, but only temporary, obviously. And then things just progress from there, that they can't find a replacement, they can't do this, they can't do that. In London, they can't get a replacement surgeon quickly. He would have to stay there a bit longer. It just all adds up to delays and confusion.
That was like 2 months or something like that, I believe.
Finished up, yes, at least 2 months, if not 3. He was left in limbo. But obviously, the more time he spends with Louisa and the baby, then the less he wants to go back to London.
But still willing to go.
I think he was, yes, because there didn't seem to me to be much communication between them, except when they were arguing. A really tender point, I thought, was at the funeral of Joan. Martin was stood waiting for the hearse to arrive, and Louisa comes up, and she gets hold of his hand. And
that was sweet.
That was really sweet. And that was, to me, that was one of the highlights of Louisa in the entire series. That because other than that, she doesn't really show a lot of affection, I don't think, for him, until the sort of final episodes where they seem to be kissing and making up.
Uh-huh.
So, whereas he, on the other hand, I think he does try, but he has this reserve of not doing anything in public.
I think Judy, in an earlier episode, she pointed out that he treats pregnancy almost as an affliction, and he most certainly wants her to be a stay-at-home mom. So he has some very specific views of what motherhood should be, which is interesting in the sense that he did not have a good role model in seeing what good motherhood was.
I wonder if he'd seen it from the perspective of just watching other parents who came and picked up the sons from school.
Or Joan, how well Joan treated him. She and Phil treated him like a son.
Yes, yeah. But he was only with her for 6 weeks every year for, 5, 6 years? So he's picked a lot up in that time. I don't think he's read many romances either.
No. No. We know that from one of their first dates when she's reading some paperback novel and he offers what he's been reading, which is like, Parasites of the Skin or something like that.
Yeah. I think, though, isn't that the case that most people will try and find out an interest of the other person, but basically they stick to what they know, which obviously is of no interest, in this case, to each other. I found that funny a bit.
I agree. Yeah, it is funny to see how they go back and forth on that. I find that the amount of time that they have to actually date and get to know each other, if you look at the series, is really quite compressed because they kind of have that epiphany at the end of, was it season 2? Yeah, it's at the end of season 2 when they have the big drinking scene.
Yes, yeah.
So that's sort of, we have this relationship, and then they explore a little bit of that, and it goes completely off the rails until he proposes, but then the wedding fails. So at this point, they've really had like 3 dates.
Yep.
And then she's pregnant. They really don't date while she's pregnant. He's just managing her care, and they're having these conflicts over how she should treat her pregnancy and how she should be taking care of herself and all that. But he's heading out of town that whole time.
She insists that she doesn't want him involved because at the beginning she'd seen him with Edith and made the assumption that they were a couple. So she was just continually telling him that the baby wasn't his problem. So I thought that was really harsh. She never gave him a chance to say that he was just a colleague. And when he did mention that he was only helping Edith to do a paper, she totally disbelieved him. And I think, well, why? Why? Hello, there I go. I'm into the story. And instead of thinking, get over yourself, it's a program, a TV program, I'm absolutely in there.
Yeah. It's great. It's what it does to us, which is a wonderful thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
In season 5, we find that now she's had the baby.
Yep.
And they're living together, and you can't really, I mean, they've gone from a few dates and a failed wedding and a really contentious pregnancy to being married. And, the wedding is such a crazy episode. Things are going okay.
Yeah.
They get married. They escape the reception. They're at the honeymoon place. Martin actually makes a joke, which we haven't seen in a long time. He makes the alternate treatment for her glaucoma is a parrot on the shoulder.
Yes.
And then the smoke comes, and after that, it like goes to hell in a handbasket and they act very weirdly. I mean, he's completely bullying about how they should walk and where they should walk and what direction they should walk in. And then she's making fun of his lack of outdoorsman skills, right? When they're in the wood, not the forest, and the horse scares him, and this is my final warning and all this stuff. But then she actually pulls the gun on that guy at the house to say, apologize to my husband, which to me seems very out of character for her.
Yeah.
And then the man says something about, now you're married and wives and it's so boring. And Martin goes ballistic on him with, don't you,
Yes.
And I just think the two of them are just so out of character at that point that
I wondered if it was a different writer.
Or just it's our first glimpse of how this season's going to go in the sense that this is now they're married and they're already seeing tension and acting weirdly. And
I never thought about it that way. I must admit. Going back to when they were in the lodge together and he made a joke, I thought it was totally insensitive of Louisa to say, oh, you made a joke. Oh, that's very good, Martin. I cringed.
Did you?
I really did. Instead of just giggling and carrying on with the rest of the evening, she seemed to make a big thing of it, which I would have thought would have knocked his confidence.
And I hadn't thought of it that way.
And then, of course, obviously, when the smoke came into the room, well, that put the end to that. And, of course, the whole thing of them wandering around still in their wedding clothes due to Bert's driving off with their luggage, I felt really sorry for Louisa. Walking and trying to walk in wedding shoes and a wedding dress. But kudos to Martin for stepping up and carrying her through the water.
True. That's true. Yeah. Even though it was very awkward looking.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like he was doing a fireman's carry. That's not what I really expected he was going to do.
But then the next scene, she'd switched to piggyback, and you didn't
Right.
see them switching. So perhaps he really found it difficult, or the stuntman really found it difficult.
It was when she first got up, she was choking him, right? Because you're
Yeah,
crushing my windpipe.
yeah,
So
yeah,
had to do a quick adjust.
yeah. So that was a weird scene. I didn't take to the ending of that episode. It was funny though, seeing Ruth trying to feed James Henry with the mashed peas or whatever it was.
The very ending of that episode I found to be really funny with it's not their blood. Don't worry, it's not their blood.
Yeah.
And Penhal's like, we can fix this. There's a million ways to dispose of a body.
Yes, not what you would expect a policeman to say, really.
No, and Mark would not have said that.
No, no. We would have been, what's all this then?
Right, yes. And who needs the help out on the moor? So jumping back to season 5, right after Joan dies and we have the funeral, we also get to meet Ruth for the first time.
Yes, and she seems very odd in that episode in that she doesn't really know how to communicate with Martin or Louisa. She's very stiff, which when you compare her to Joan, totally chalk and cheese. Never mind Martin and Louisa, I think Ruth and Joan were more at opposite ends of a spectrum than the other two. So, however, it was nice in a later episode that Ruth realised, or thought she'd realised, that she was actually dying because she had the same symptoms as she thought as a mother who died from lupus. Then she goes and sees Martin because he insists, and she tells him what her suspicions are. But when he looks at her with a diagnostician's intellect, he sees that the symptoms are not lupus as she thought, but Sjogren's syndrome, which does have some similarities, but is curable, or at least it can be alleviated with tablets and eye drops. And then I found it really touching that Ruth got up and went to hug him, and Martin steps back and said, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, he's so stiff. The two of them are peas in a pod, aren't they?
They are, yes, both of them quite reluctant to have contact with anybody else, which makes for a total contrast when in the later seasons we find out a bit more about Ruth's story. So I won't go further than that.
Right, yes, that's right. Ruth is sort of an evolved Martin.
Yes.
Because, the two of them are clearly reserved. People do not like speaking about anything emotional or personal, but because of her psychiatrist background, she understands that, there's healthy communication and you can't just keep all this stuff bottled up. I always thought Ruth was exactly the person that Martin needed for this point in his life.
Yeah. I think it was a good point to bring in Ruth and have them interact like that because, as you say, they learn, I think, a lot about each other and about how to go on with the rest of the world. From that point on, Ruth seems to open up a lot more in terms of how she reacts with other people. And we see indications of her speaking to the villagers and listening to the gossip, something which Martin finds totally a waste of time. However, it would have done him good to listen to some of the gossip and at least pay attention to it.
So we get to meet two major new characters. We've got Morwenna, who comes in, who can't manage to nail down a job at the beginning. She seems to go from job to job, but then she ends up as the receptionist. And then we also get to meet Eleanor, who is Louisa's mom. So what's your impression of Morwenna?
Well, Morwenna seems at first quite scatterbrained in that she cannot keep a job for love nor money. And it's really not explained as to why. When she starts with Martin, he seems very reluctant to take her on. But she's keen to make an impression and is late on her first date, in the job. She said, "But I've only been late once," and he retaliates with, "It's your first day."
Yes. Yeah.
So
You're one for one on failing.
And then the next day she comes in at 6:30 in the morning and starts banging around in the kitchen. hello, it's wonderful. And we find out that she's been taking tablets that the army prescribed for her grandfather. And when Martin eventually susses out what's going on, he takes one look at the tablets and says, the stimulants. That's why you're running around and all excited. You shouldn't be having that. And of course, Morwen is horrified because she doesn't do drugs of any description, much less something like that.
Amphetamines.
But she does get better, I think, as the series progresses. And for me, she is the most competent of the secretaries once she gets into full swing.
Yeah. She really seems to have an aptitude from her personality perspective. She's very good about controlling the office, which Pauline did quite well too. I mean, Pauline, I think, was quite a good manager of the people, but she wasn't as professional as Morwenna ended up becoming.
I think Morwenna showed a lot more professionalism. I found Pauline to be quite sneaky and underhand, listening at doors or taking pictures of Martin laid on the floor with the dog. But that's
I do remember Morwenna sneaking at a door. I forget who was in the office, but Morwenna was listening. I remember when whoever it was in the office comes out, it might have been Mrs. Tischel comes out, and it might be it's probably in season 6, and I think Morwenna's just like tidying the magazines on the nightstand there between.
Yes, I think she was there in case Mrs. Tischel started something untoward. I think she was on bodyguard duty at that point. That was my interpretation of it.
I buy that.
Yeah, I never thought she would be as awful as Pauline and going listening at doors to find out something scandalous that she could thereby pass on to her friends and what have you.
Or opening the mail.
Yeah, that was another. No, don't get me started on Pauline. I know we share a name, but I hope that we don't share anything else.
Morwenna was also always thinking that she was supposed to dive into the medicine, which cracked me up. Like, it's like, I could try closing the wound if you talk me through it. And then at one point, Martin's like, gloves, because he wants a pair of gloves, and Morwenna puts them on like she's going to be doing something.
Yeah, as I say, I thought Morwenna was my favourite secretary of all the ones he's had. And as you say, another character comes back in is Eleanor, Louisa's mother. And she was another character that I didn't take to, mainly because I did have some sympathy with Louisa and being left on her own. And then as the episodes go by, you find that Eleanor's really only there for one thing, and it's not to meet up with Louisa. She's just killing two birds with one stone, which I really felt sorry for Louisa at that point.
Yeah, I think Eleanor is very self-centered and shallow. I guess she left when Louisa was 11 to just go off with Javier, and then she makes some comment about, I asked you to come to Spain. Like, yeah, Louisa didn't want to be in Spain. Her home is in Portwenn. Why was this 11-year-old just going to pick herself up and run after her mother, who's the one who ran out?
Yeah, I can't see that at all. As you say, Louisa was totally ensconced at home. Her father was at home. Why should she go to Spain? And I think Eleanor would have been upset, to be honest, if Louisa had said, okay, I'll come with you. I don't think that relationship would have worked out at all, not given what we know now of Eleanor's behaviour when she did come back.
That's a good point. If she had followed her, Eleanor probably would have been put out, and she maybe would have picked up and moved somewhere else.
I do think that, yes. I think she probably would have broken up with Javier and missed out on running a canteen in Spain.
We start to learn more about Martin's treatment as a child. Like when he's, babies are left alone in their room to cry it out.
Yeah.
So we see that, and we hear that also repeated in season 6 from Margaret when she says Martin always cried himself to sleep eventually.
Yeah, I felt really sorry for Martin at that point. I think it was one of Martin's throwaway lines in either late season 2 or early 3, where he says, my father often beat me with a table tennis bat or a belt. It didn't do me any harm, which I found totally shocking.
Right.
So,
he says something similar in season 5 with the when he's insisting that the baby be allowed to just cry and tells
Yeah.
Louisa, don't pick up the baby. That's the thin edge of the wedge.
Yeah.
And he says, I used to have to just cry myself to sleep and it never did me any harm.
Yeah.
And then Margaret says something about that in season 6 about, Martin always eventually cried himself to sleep. We did
Yes.
things differently back then.
Yeah, we did things differently. Happily, you'd have thought that it doesn't go on, but it's still going on in other, in real life, shall we say, which is a frightening thought.
We learned some more between seasons 5 and 6. We learn a little bit more about Martin's upbringing between sort of comments that he makes to Ruth or things that Ruth says. So I think Martin says something about he was less than 7 years old, 6 3/4 years old or something, when he had to take a cab to the train. He took a convoluted route as a very young child to get off to boarding school basically on his own. His parents didn't even drop him.
No.
And then Ruth makes some comment later about how, he was, when he was 4 years old, he was a sensitive, vulnerable little boy. And then by 6, he was withdrawn and, just withdrawn into himself.
Basically.
Yeah, shut down. And we hear the comments about being locked in cupboards already. We've heard about him getting beaten by a bat. We see him flinch and drop a plate when Margaret touches him. So you can tell that a touch from her is not a tender thing.
I think in that particular point in the film, he was remembering what it felt like. And of course, he jumps because when we first see him, when anybody touches him, he flinches away, which, given the size of him, you would have wondered at, because surely a bloke of that size wouldn't normally be afraid of anybody, but he clearly was. And I think that contributes actually to the lack of physical contact that Louisa offers him, because she's seen him flinch and she knows to some extent that he doesn't like to be touched. So she's then confused because she's a touchy-feely person and he doesn't offer anything, reaching out for her. So they're both stuck there in their own little worlds, not really communicating at all.
They're so mismatched.
Yeah. I think going back to your original point about them not dating very much and concertinaing everything in, they just don't get the time and opportunity to discuss things, to work out how to go about living together. Because, as you say, they didn't date very much. He wouldn't let go of his patients, and she couldn't seem to get through to him at all as to what she wanted. She wouldn't tell him she wanted to go out. She wouldn't tell him she wanted a honeymoon, a proper honeymoon.
Right.
No, that's the way I see it,
Yeah. They just assumed they learned a little bit and then they just made so many assumptions that were wrong about each other.
Yeah. I think it just reflects on how they were treated as they were growing up, that they would say something and each would assume that the other one was sincere in what they were saying. They wouldn't question, well, what about this or what about that? They would just think, yep, that's the way it's going to be and I can accept that. Or I won't push it any further.
I have to think about that. I see him as taking everything at face value and not giving a thought to there might be a subtext, because the way he speaks is always what he says is what he means, right?
Yes, he always tells the truth.
So, and Louisa criticizes him a bunch for what he says because she doesn't like what he says.
Yeah.
And then she tends to think on his behalf.
Yes.
Which is where I think they kind of get in trouble, because if she were to just ask him, do you want a honeymoon? He might say something like, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
But she just assumes he doesn't, right? And then she answers that she doesn't, which he takes as face value because that's what he's expecting from communication.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right there.
Did we just violently agree and not realize it? I think I just resaid what you said.
Possibly. But I do agree that it's just the miscommunication. Martin will, as you say what he means and then assume that everybody else does the same. But Louisa is an empath, so she looks at him and thinks, well, what does he really want? I'll go along with what he wants. But what she's really thinking is, I'll go along with what I think he wants, which is not necessarily the same thing.
That's right.
Yeah, I can see that totally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just so much fun to be in there and just empathizing with the pair of them.
Yeah. And it's fun to dissect it a little bit later like this.
Yes, yeah.
It's like you can relive it, but you're also giving more cycles to it.
I'm just totally thrilled that there are other people out there who see the programs the way I see them. Because sometimes when I talk about various programs, I get looks of complete bewilderment from the people I'm talking to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. This one has been a bit crazy for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I think I see a lot of, like I mentioned in a prior episode, I just see a lot of myself in these characters. And so it's a little eye-opening at the same time.
Yes, sometimes it can be. When I think, I could be like that. No, I'm not like that. Deny it instantly. But yeah, I think I am.
That's me. Martin does tend to make several decisions for them, but he has taken her into account. So he registers the child's name, but he registers the name she wanted.
Yes.
And he arranges the christening, but he does check her calendar. And I think in his mind, he is treating her the way he would be fine with people treating him.
Yes.
So you've checked my calendar, it's clear, so that's all that needs to happen.
Yeah.
I don't think he even necessarily sees the christening as a big event. It's a thing to do, right? Check the box off.
Well, I don't think either of them are especially religious.
Mm-hmm.
So going and having James Henry christened is just, as you say, a box-ticking exercise as far as they're concerned,
Mm-hmm.
to have things done correctly, so to speak. If it hadn't been a thing, then I think he would just have been called James Henry and that would have been it.
With respect to painting the flat, I mean, remind me how that works, because doesn't she just kind of decide to come stay with him for the holidays? Or did she say she's going to come live in London?
I think at first, at first she said she would come for the holidays, but then I think she changed her mind and said she would come and live there with him in London. She'd give up her job and all the rest of it. So she was then thinking, right, we'll get the flat sorted out, we'll decorate it and everything such as that. But Martin had already thought that he was going to live there, so he'd done it as how he would want it, which is painted white, sterile looking. Given that he's going back as a surgeon, then I would guess that's it. It's clean and it would be tidy. A lot cleaner than the house in Portwenn, I have to say, because I think the whole place looks as if it could need steaming and cleaning from top to bottom.
Yeah, why did they never paint?
I don't. Well, in season 2, they did it. That kitchen looked really nice, with a nice clean table and all the equipment, the cupboards were clean. And then for some reason, it went to a dingy green later on. Yeah. And I remember in his study, he had a nice chrome, I don't know whether it was glass topped, but a chrome desk, chrome legs tabletop. And then you see him with a wooden desk.
See, they should have had you in charge of consistency.
Possibly. I'm a pedant, you realise. I'm very pedantic, definitely.
Hey, consistency is important in a TV show that has series after series.
Continuity. Yeah, that's what
Yes.
it is. Continuity.
Yep.
I think for the main part, I think they really did do a good job. It was just those standout things for me that puzzled me. So, yeah.
So season 5, episode 8.
Yeah, at the castle.
At the castle. That particular episode has my favorite scene of the whole series.
Yeah, it was nice, that, definitely. When he stood there speaking to Mrs. Tishel, allegedly, but in reality he was looking at Louisa and telling her how much he loved her and how he only stayed because she was there, because he couldn't stand Portwenn or the people with the pinched faces, but because she was there, he'd put up with it. How she wasn't in a puddle at the end of that, I've no idea.
I'll tell you one thing I really enjoyed about that scene, or many things that I enjoyed about that. Selena Cadell does a phenomenal job
She does, yeah.
with Mrs. Tischel on that, because it's like a Romeo and Juliet scene, right? But when she's up there and talking about Louisa like that trollop, and she gives what is like a 30-word summary of the entire series.
It is.
You know, so
yeah.
first you're here, and then you're gone, and then you're with her, and then you're not with her.
Yeah.
It's just perfect.
Yes.
And then when Martin is negotiating with her, he has two sources of input. He has Ruth and Louisa.
Yeah.
And he's got a psychiatrist who's used to dealing with people having psychotic issues.
Yeah.
And the woman he loves. And whose advice does he take?
The woman he loves, yeah.
Yes.
I had to laugh at that he totally ignored what Ruth was saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And just tell her you're a difficult person. I'm a difficult person. Why did you wait so long?
I'm an idiot. Yeah, I'm afraid we were both in that scene. So
Yeah.
must have been
Yeah.
stood there.
Well, I think I've told you, my husband and I would yell at the set. We would yell at the television.
Right. So he enjoys it as much as you did, or was he enjoying your performance?
I think he was enjoying it as much as I did, but he would fall asleep half the time. And then the other half of the time, he would be paying complete attention and be entirely inside of it.
Yes, yeah. Now, that was very romantic, that scene. It was very touching, I thought, given that the other 7 episodes mainly had them at a good distance between each other and their viewpoints. But that final scene brought it all together, and it was very satisfying to watch, I have to say.
But I agree. When you look back at it, though, from a context of season 6, and you add it together with all of the seasons we've seen before, we still have 2 people who are obviously very drawn to each other, who have not in the least worked on the problems in their relationship. They've just gone from sort of like dramatic event to dramatic event. So it's like the proposal and the failed wedding, and then the pregnancy, and then the birth, and then I'm going to be leaving, and then the baby gets stolen, and they stay together, but nothing has changed about their relationship. And that brings us into season 6.
Yeah. I think that's a really good theory as to what's going on. When we get into season 6, we find that although they get married, it's still not enough for Martin, I don't think. I still think he feels insecure. And I've puzzled as to why that might be. But I'm wondering if he's remembering that every time something good happens for him, something bad occurs not long after, such as when James Henry is born. He's full of joy and grateful. And then the next day he finds out that Jonah died. So something really good has been followed fairly quickly by something really bad. And I'm wondering if, knowing that he's now married to Louisa, he's just waiting for the other shoe to fall.
Yeah.
Because then he goes into some sort of depression, which sinks a wedge between them again.
Yeah.
Because neither one of them can talk to the other.
And
Whether
he's
that's
particularly stunted, isn't he? I mean, he can't share anything about how he feels with her. You see, during numerous episodes, he really believes that he has something wrong with him physically. Because he can't sleep, and he can't eat, and he's got agita. And did you notice he goes back to his clocks?
Yes, I did notice that. Working with the clocks, I think, gives him a measure of control over something. And I think he doesn't think he has any control in his life with Louisa, because there's always the noise, there's always the hustle and bustle of looking after James, of having him looked after by a suitable childminder, or Louisa's in and out. She wants to be at meetings. She doesn't seem to me to want to spend a great deal of time at home. Otherwise, why not? So with his clocks, he knows the clock is going to be there. All the pieces are going to be there. He'll be able to fit them together and at the end of it have a very nice working clock. So it gives him somewhere to hide, for want of a better description, to shut out the world when he's doing that.
He does try to invite her in at the very beginning.
Yeah, but she wanted to tell him it was their 2-week anniversary. So she was hoping for something more than looking at a boring clock.
Yeah.
And all he could do was talk about semantics and say an anniversary is strictly a year or an annual event, not 2 weeks. And she gets all exasperated because he didn't pick up on the clues, social clues she was giving him.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not Martin.
No.
He doesn't understand, which I thought was a pity.
It's an expectation she has of him that I don't know why she has that expectation.
Well, because as you say, they haven't spent a great deal of time together. She only sees him in a professional capacity most of the time. And, well, I know they haven't spent a great deal of time together because either one of them is in a crisis at some point. Martin with his patients or Louisa with the children at school. Or the
He's never been
caretakers.
a big romantic, right? I mean, he's given her flowers at her house once, but I mean, he brought her yams, right?
Yeah, for her birthday, I think. Because it was that they were iron rich. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because she
And the
was
flowers,
anemic.
yeah, the flowers he gave her, the patient had left them for him, so he hadn't even gone to the shop and bought them himself.
And he told her they're from
Yeah,
a patient.
yeah,
So why does she expect him to have any sort of romantic bone in his body?
yeah. I think he does, actually. I just don't think he knows how to produce it at a given time. So,
We know he wrote poetry for Edith.
no, he wrote poetry when he was with Edith. He did write a poem at one point, and she dismissed it, so he said. But I do think he wrote poetry as a sideline, as a way of winding down. I don't think he suddenly picked up a pen and wrote a poem for her and then never wrote again. I think he was used to writing poetry, and he did one for her. And of course, after she did that, I don't think he bothered with the poetry anymore.
Could be.
So that was my thoughts.
You do get into it, don't you?
I do. I can't help it. It's one of the few programs where I have been totally involved.
I think it's a credit to their writing, don't you? I mean,
It
the
is,
scripts
yes.
did such a good job making these people real.
Yeah.
So in season 6, some of the recurring theme that we see is Martin withdrawing and getting more and more basically depressed, which he thinks that everything that is wrong with him is lack of sleep, his inability to sleep, his lack of appetite, his unease with things. He's not at all looking for a psychological reason for that. He's looking for physical reasons for that.
I think that was very well done to show somebody sinking into a depression like that. I didn't really understand why he was becoming more and more distant. Not at the time. Looking back and with further explanation further forward, it seems obvious, but while I was watching it, I was puzzled because seemingly he had exactly what he wanted. He'd got married, they were living together, they had a child, and yes, he'd lost Joan, but seemingly he'd got replacements. Sounds harsh, but I don't mean replacements. I mean something else for him to concentrate on. So I couldn't quite understand why he slipped into that depression. But then I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't know.
But Ruth is able to say, Martin, why are you looking for a physical explanation of this?
Yeah, that was until the end of 6, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we look at like episode 6 of season 6, what do we have going on there? That's Martin can't do anything right regarding even how he sleeps, in Louisa's opinion. She just wants to tell him how he ought to sleep.
Yeah. I think she's trying in her own way to help him, which is to her credit, because he's not a man that accepts help easily. I think looking back, he has to be really seriously ill or as a result of an accident or something to be helped in any way. But of course, Louisa isn't a medical professional. I don't think he sets much store by what she's trying to do for her. Which is
lavender oil's not going to do it.
No, not really. But he makes such a fuss about the lavender oil. I think you big wimp. Get over it.
I mean, does he have a heightened sense of smell because he's a surgeon or something?
No, I think it's something he's always had, and I think he's developed it because I think certain diseases give off smells, such as the alcohol breath from diabetes.
Mm.
or some of the fungal diseases that people get. I remember him sniffing Mel's armpit. I wouldn't have liked that if I'd been sat there. But
No, no.
I think,
Eve,
I think he's sensitive to smells. So
it is a recurring theme, right?
he always likes to be clean. Even if he gets a tiny spot of dirt on his suit, he's up for a shower and change as soon as possible.
I almost feel like Louisa was also assuming that she was the problem
Yeah,
in
but
what was going on.
That's her own insecurities coming to the fore, I think. Well, looking back, which I have to do, because at the time I was puzzled by his behaviour, why he was sinking into a depression, given that seemingly everything was just what he wanted. I do think, that Louisa was getting ready to go because she couldn't get out of him what was the matter. And because she's been, I'll say ill-treated, but not physically, but mentally, in that a mother left, relationships haven't gone well in the past, a father finished up in jail, everybody seemed to be leaving her. So I think she was thinking, well, it must be my fault. Martin's not happy. It must be my fault. Because, of course, everything is in Louisa's mind. Everybody reacts to her in ways that either please her or don't please her. Somehow she feels it's always her fault. She seems, she's very egocentric, isn't she? Whereas Martin, I don't think, is egocentric to the extent that she is. So he doesn't think that at all. He doesn't assume straight away that he's at fault, whereas she does.
And he might want to assume he's at fault a little more than he does.
Well, yeah, of course. Anybody who always speaks the truth doesn't have to explain himself any further, does he?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
and Ruth diagnoses him, right? It says, you feel like you don't deserve her.
Yeah. And that's a terrible thing for us to realise about him, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I must admit, all my sympathies lie with Martin. They don't lie with her.
Yeah. I'm definitely Team Martin. If there's teams, I'm on Team Martin.
Yeah, me too. There was lots of times when I thought Louisa was totally unfair.
I yell at him a lot, though, because he's always putting his foot in it, too. I mean, he says things that he shouldn't say, and he's just socially inept, and I don't want to give him a free pass for his insensitive comments.
Yeah.
The free pass I give him is I don't necessarily think he realizes they're insensitive.
No, because he's totally lacking in social awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It's surprising to me that he managed to be a doctor and to be rose up the scale to be the registrar and then chief of vascular surgery. So you'd have thought he would have learned something, but I guess being the size he was and being brusque made other people stay away, so he didn't really have to learn how to please people. He just was himself. Yeah, I think so. But again, he didn't have any friends. He didn't have many girlfriends, and from what I can gather, Edith wasn't interested in socialising with him. She just purely wanted the study partner and eventually a sexual partner, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, she didn't want to go out with him. She didn't want to go drinking to park. So then we move on to episode 7 of 6, where you've got poor Mike Pruddy, who has absconded from the army, and all the rigmarole of trying to get him back. And Joe suspended in disbelief. I'll say that was funny. Well worth watching that, just to see him do that.
I do like Mike Pruddy, I have to admit. I had a warm spot in my heart for him because he's a good guy. I mean, he was doing a great job as the nanny, and, even his OCD wasn't damaging.
Now that puzzled me. Why did Louisa take such a dislike to him tidying stuff up and deliberately move things out of the way, while he was stood there? And yet Martin, I think he was quite pleased that the place was exactly regimented, but he never did it himself, I don't think, or not to the extent that Mike did.
Yeah.
So,
I would say that Mike Mike's the extreme of tidy, right? And
Yeah.
I've got a feeling that Louisa's not as tidy as Martin, right? Because he's cleaning up when she's cooking and
That would drag
putting
me
the
around the
towel
bend.
right where the towel belongs.
Yeah.
And you almost have a sense that behind the cupboard doors and the drawers, it might be a bit of a mess in there, but we don't see it because it's covered.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Martin has an appreciation of that orderliness. And there's actually a part in one of the episodes, it might have even been that episode, where Martin says something like, tidy house, tidy mind. And
Yeah.
Louisa says, it was tidy. And,
Yes.
and she looks at Martin like, and you'd better agree with me. And he just goes, yes. So she might have been taking offense at this person who, in essence, is keeping a better house than she was.
Yeah, I could well understand that.
And I think she also saw Mike as having like a psychological issue, and she didn't want that, she thought would be weird. And she didn't want she already thought she had enough weird at home with Martin,
Yeah.
being shy and introverted and being the way he was, that more weird was not going to help James Henry be non-weird.
That was another recurring theme throughout 6, to the extent that she didn't want James Henry to be like Martin, and forcing Martin to go to the playgroup. I honestly think that was just cruel. It would clearly be out of his comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't quite know why he acquiesced to go. Lucky he did, mind, because he picked up on that child's cataracts, but
Right.
yeah.
I think he tried. I mean, he had no idea how to be a father. So, I mean, she's basically telling him, this is what you need to do to be his father today, is take him to Millie's play date or whatever that was.
She could have spoken to him. She didn't have to force him into going to do something that would be totally against what she knows he's like. I mean, if he'd forced her to do something, I don't know what, but it would have been just as cruel. So,
yeah, I mean, James Henry could have missed that play date one day.
Yeah, I think he was only just over 6 months old at that point. Maybe he's a bit older, but even so, he wouldn't remember it. And then I was saying, I don't want him to be like you. That was, if she didn't actually say it, then it was certainly implied, which I thought was a pretty low blow. We all say things in the heat of the moment that we regret, but for some of the things that Louisa says, she must have been thinking about them for a long time.
And also, like you said, that's something of a recurring theme that she talks numerous times about, not wanting James to be introverted.
I'm just not with that at all. Everything has to be how she wants it. Everything outside of what she wants is wrong, which shows to me a lack of tolerance on her part.
But Martin has his ways, and he's not meeting her halfway in the social thing. I mean, he does do the occasional thing to try, but it's not always with good grace.
No, I think that's where he's at fault. Because, as you say, she knows what he's like, in that he's not a social creature, he doesn't drink, he doesn't enjoy what we would call ordinary things like pop music or films or TV series. But the reverse is also true. He doesn't understand her and doesn't see that he has to step outside of his comfort zone. He always wants people to step outside of theirs to do what he wants. So there's a lot of not giving and taking, I think, which, as you say, is what makes it such a brilliant season.
Then you get to sports day, which is just horrible.
Yeah. I felt so sorry for Louisa in that respect, that he didn't come and give out the prizes. He had no idea. And yet, looking back, he must have been to his own prize-giving ceremonies. He must have seen how prizes are given out. I don't think there's any excuse for the way he behaved there. And I can well understand her getting into such a rage that she chases after him. But by the same token, I was horrified when she was whistling after him and saying, "Stop, stop, stop." I was totally shocked when she had her accident. That was definitely a jaw-dropping moment for me.
I practically fell off the couch. I don't know about you, but when I get into the thing, I feel I mean, my body's there too. When he hits his head, I feel it, you know?
Yes,
When she
yeah,
got hit by the car, both of us, I think, just jerked like, oh my God, I didn't see that
yeah,
coming.
yeah. No, I didn't. I thought that was a brilliant stroke. So, and then his agonized shout, Louisa!
Yes. And
Yeah,
she wants nothing to do with him at that point. Could you
yeah,
imagine, like,
go.
he feels terrible because he
Yeah,
probably knows that he was a complete idiot
yeah,
back at the, giving away the things. And he knows that this is his fault for what he did. And she has every justification for being completely angry at him. And
yeah,
now not only is she hurt and in his domain, which is medicine,
yeah,
he's not allowed to help
go
her.
with it. Yeah, yeah, that must have been absolutely soul destroying for him. I'm torn. I totally understand where Louise is coming from, and I really get what Martin is feeling.
Mhm.
I still can't make up my mind which one of them's right or wrong. Although I think if we say that they're both at fault, then I think that's true as well.
You can live with that.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to.
Anytime you feel like that, you can probably step back and say, Louise is probably right.
Why?
Because you're so torn. Because you're on Team Martin. And you don't want him to be wrong.
Possibly, yeah. That might be. No, I get why Louisa was the way she was. It would have killed me as well to have to go through that.
And she's just trying to reward the kids and get them to exercise and get them to appreciate the value of some level of physical fitness. And
Yeah,
he is undermining like not even going for a walk or running,
no,
right? It's like it can cause your heels and your shins up. He can't come up with anything good to say. It wasn't clear to me that he had been told that he was going to be giving a speech. She did tell him he would hand out the awards, but I didn't get the
yeah,
sense in the kitchen that he had been told he had to give a speech.
no. He's not very good at off the cuff speechifying, is
No,
he?
like Radio
And
Portwenn.
yeah, I think the other thing we should remember is that his mother was sat there as they
Right.
were having that discussion. So he probably didn't want to say anything more than what he did. And I think Louisa was inhibited at saying what she wanted because his mother was sat there. And his mother, what a miserable piece of work she was.
I'll tell you, the scene between Ruth and Margaret when it's like the gunfight at the OK Corral.
You've just read my mind. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I thought even the music reflected that.
Yes. Yes. They've got that little guitar
Yeah,
riff.
yeah. And what we learned about Margaret at that point shocked me. It really did. I had no idea that she was like that as a child.
Mm-hmm.
So Ruth calling her out about it, it explains a little bit more about Margaret.
Yeah. A little thief.
Yeah, but then it also explained what happened at the airport when Louise was leaving.
Yeah. You're right. She stole the clock. I didn't even think of that.
She stole the clock.
Yeah. Because it has value. I mean, Martin kicks her out with no money, so she needs some source of money. I guess she figures she can
Yes.
sell the clock.
I think Martin was a little bit annoyed. In fact, really annoyed that she'd taken the clock
Mm-hmm.
because that belonged to his grandfather. I think that was all he had of his grandfather's.
And he put so much work into restoring it.
Yeah. I wasn't sure whether it was totally finished.
Mm-hmm. We see it at one point when Louise is waiting for the taxi to arrive to take her to the airport. He's got his watch in his hand and he's looking at the clock, and the clock is ticking
Right.
away on the shelf.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that.
And yeah, when Ruth does a great job just eviscerating Margaret, and you really get a sense from Margaret's visit how little she liked children.
Yeah,
And what scarring Martin has from his upbringing with her.
yeah,
And how he finally does stand up to her and kicks her out without a dime.
yeah,
And we cheered for Martin when he did that. We thought that was great, you know. And then with Ruth, you see such a nice scene when Martin goes to see Ruth when Louisa
yeah,
has left.
yeah. I thought that was lovely. To sit out in the field and discuss the situation. She tells Martin that he has to change. It won't be easy. He has to work twice as hard as anybody else to change. But if he's willing to, then he can. So, and that sets us up for season 7.
Yep. And also, I mean, one thing that Ruth is different from Joan. Remember, Joan says people don't change Martin, and Martin says, I can.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, you can't. You guys can't change. But Ruth is willing to tell him, you can change. You have more work than most people.
Yeah.
But you're
That's
capable
right.
of it.
Yeah. I think we're all capable of some change. It's whether or not we revert as the years go by.
Right. Right. In the very last episode, you've got Martin having to do surgery on Louisa.
Yeah. And then that must have been awful. One thing I did notice about that, though, is he was all scrubbed up. He was gloved. She was on the operating table. They had a little bit of talk, and then he touches her. And I thought, you've just destroyed the sterility.
Maybe she'd been swabbed.
Well, possibly, yeah. And I thought, well, it's only a TV show, Pauline. Simmer down.
That's funny. But in that same scene, though, like right before he touches her face, she's had the pre-meds, right? And she's cracking up and talking to him about wearing a thong type swim trunks. And he's bearing his soul that he needs her help because he doesn't think he's a good husband and he wants to be better at it. And you're just like...
Yeah, my bottom lip was quivering at that.
What, did you think she died when he went into the bathroom and the tears were going down his face?
No, I thought she was all right. I was puzzled as to why he was crying, unless it was with they didn't look like tears of relief. They looked as if, that something had happened. It didn't occur to me that she might have died. I don't think he would have stopped at the bathroom if she'd died. I think he'd have been up on the roof. Yeah.
I mean, Chris and I were both like, no. They wouldn't. Yeah. They wouldn't do that. They didn't make us wait for long before we knew that she was okay. But I figured when you've been through some incredibly traumatic series of things and you've had to hold it together because there was something important to do, it was relief. Yeah. It was just that ability to like, okay, I can let it out now because it's done and we are where we are.
The sort of final 5 minutes of episode 8 of season 6, Louisa's talking to the nurse saying, have you seen my husband? And the nurse says, no, I haven't. I expect he'll be along soon. And then she looks up and she says, oh, he's the surgeon that did your operation. And then she leaves. So then they have an awkward conversation about not wanting things to continue the way they are, and neither of them wants that. And they both agree that they want things to change without really specifying how. But they are agreeing that they will talk about it. And then she says to him, thank you for coming after me. And he looks shell-shocked. And he turns round and he says to her, and this bit I think he got wrong, you're my patient and you're my wife. For me, he should have said, you're my wife and my patient. I think.
I absolutely get your point.
But the absolute final thing, and every time I watch it I want to cry, is when he turns and he walks out of the ward and then the hospital, and he's absolutely ramrod straight as he goes. It kills me every time I see it. I feel so sorry for him. Yeah. Brilliant acting, of course, but yeah. And I wasn't convinced by Louisa's sort of chewing. To me, she should have been in tears, floods of tears at that. But
I agree. Maybe she's still drugged.
That would be charitable.
I kind of go back and forth on the you're my patient and you're my wife, because I definitely had that thought, but I became okay with it. Dollars to Donuts, there was a debate about that in the screenwriter's room.
Do you think? Yeah.
Because for exactly the point you said is like, which should come first? Because you're my patient it's the cloth of his life, right? I mean, everybody is his patient and he takes care of his patients. First and foremost, that's what it is. But then sort of the capper or the crowning thing is, and you're my wife.
Now, to me, he should have stayed there and given her a big hug. But to see him walk away devastated, I found it devastating myself.
But that was the capper of your season 6, and now you got to wait 2 years?
And I mean...
What a final scene.
Yeah. I was wondering at the time whether or not there would be a 7.
So, Pauline, this has been a lot of fun, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well. I appreciate all the time you put in rewatching the series so that you could comment on 5 and 6.
Thank you very much. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I do regularly rewatch Doc Martin. I tend now to watch it not all together in one burst. It's on repeat on the TV channel here, and I watch it once or twice a week as each episode comes out. So
Lucky.
to relive it all again with a fresh perspective from your point of view, it's thoroughly entertaining. So thank you very much for that.
I'm very glad that you enjoyed it too. It's fun to talk to kindred spirits.
It certainly is. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in again. I hope you enjoyed this version of the podcast and you'll like and subscribe to it, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Podcast Portwenn is an independent fan production, not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by Buffalo Pictures, ITV, Fox, or the creators of Doc Martin or Best Medicine.